Exclusive details. Government sources have told NTV that the government has asked the Supreme Court collegium to reconsider Justice Joseph's appointment to the Apex Court. Now, Justice K.M. Joseph, remember, had struck down the centre's order to impose President's rule in Uttarakhand in 2016. The government gave its nod to the appointment of Indu Malhotra as the first woman lawyer to be directly appointed to the Supreme Court judge, as a Supreme Court judge, but stayed silent for a very long time on K.M. Joseph. The collegium can now reiterate his name, which will make it incumbent upon the government to issue a warrant for his appointment to the Supreme Court. Sunil Prabhu is now joining us for more on these exclusive details that government sources have asked for a reconsideration on this. Now, Sunil, you have the exclusive details. What is the government's argument to the collegium in this?
Well, firstly, let's put it in perspective. This is an issue that has been pending for over 3.5 months. Finally, the government has acted, sent back the recommendations of the collegium, agreeing with the appointment of Indu Malhotra, and on Justice K.M. Joseph, they have raised certain objections and want the collegium to reconsider. What are the reasons that they have looked into? They believe that Justice Joseph's decision of the collegium was not a fair representation, did not have the seniority and the merit that was required. According to the government, they believe that there are at least other, and he's not the senior most, there are other at least 10 judges who are above him who should have been considered, and they need to explain why this was done. The second point, of course, is about the Kerala High Court, that there is already representation in the Supreme Court. Justice K.M. Joseph, of course, is a classic case, who's of course retiring in November. And apart from that, there are already representations in the High Courts, and there have been Chief Justices out there. There, of course, in many cases, for example, where the Prime Minister comes from Gujarat, there is no appointment of any Supreme Court judge or a Chief Justice of a High Court. So it's in that context that the government has gone ahead with this. Of course, a lot of attribution has been given to Justice Joseph's decision to strike down on Uttarakhand, and the Supreme Court, of course, subsequently had allowed the government, Mr. Harish Rawat, to do a test of strength on the floor of the House. But the government, top government sources have explained, sorry, that this has nothing to do with that judgment, and they put up a case in point talking about the former Chief Justice of India, Justice K.R. Singh, who had struck down the NDTV, who had ensured in the Arunachal Pradesh judgment had come out. So it's in that context that they say that they had no ill feelings with Justice Joseph. It's only a question of fair representation, seniority and merit. But the big point, Bhairavi, is that this is being perceived as an interference in the independence of the judiciary. Why? Because we must remember in the context, the only reason that an appointment of a Supreme Court judge or an elevation can be struck down is on the national security clause. The decision of going into the merits of seniority or whether representation, these are aspects which have to be considered by the collegium. And they, in their fitness of things, that collegium of 5 senior-most judges of the Supreme Court decide on this matter. And it's in that context that this is going to be seen as a confrontation, as an interference of the judiciary. Clearly, now the collegium will have to decide and act. This, of course, comes in the backdrop of what we have seen in the recent past, where the Chief Justice of India has come under a cloud of suspicion and controversy. It's in that context now whether that collegium will reiterate, because that collegium remains the same, whether they will reiterate what they had recommended earlier, or will there be any change. It's in that context we will have to wait and watch. But Justice Joseph's, who is the Chief Justice of Uttarakhand, his consideration, it has been sent back to him to the collegium for reconsideration.
Yes, and Sunil, then what happens next from here? As you're saying, it is now for the collegium to decide and reiterate the point that it is incumbent on the government to clear the name of K.M. Joseph. So this is going to turn into a massive standoff, as you're pointing out, and we believe that the Supreme Court collegium is determined to have his name get through.
Yeah, so if it is determined, they will have to reiterate it, send it back to the President of India through the Law Ministry and the Justice Department. And if it is reiterated in no uncertain terms, then the government has no choice but to go ahead and appoint Justice Joseph as the next and elevate him to the Supreme Court. Of course, once that is done, a major standoff will be averted. But if the collegium feels, okay, the government's point is valid, seniority, merit, and if they don't take it amiss about interference in the appointment of judges, then of course it's a different matter and a different aspect. But this is the government's thinking. They have explained this has nothing to do with the Uttarakhand judgment. It's purely on seniority and merit and fair representation. And it's in that context now that the Supreme Court collegium will have to be seen to act and ensure one way or the other, either they prima facie negate what the government has said and reiterate its point, or reconsider it. And if that happens, then Justice Joseph's case will have to be decided afresh.